So, how does an image of pure, absolute terror become one of the most powerful symbols of protection ever created? Today, we're digging into the story of the Gorgonian. It's a wild tale about how Medusa, maybe one of mythology's most tragic figures, was completely transformed into its greatest guardian.
Right. So when archaeologists unearth these things, they're not just finding pretty decorations. They see a tool, a vessel filled with what's called apotropaic power, which is just a fancy way of saying it has the power to ward off evil. This wasn't just a monster's face. It was functional, a piece of spiritual technology designed for one purpose: to keep evil away. All right, here's the roadmap for our story today. We're going to start with the raw power of this symbol, then dig into its tragic origins. We'll see how that terror was literally forged into a tool, how it became a guardian of sacred places, and then track its very surprising evolution before finally landing on its incredible legacy of defiance. Okay, so to really get a handle on the Gorgonian, you have to understand one key thing right from the start. The severed head of Medusa was never just some trophy for a hero to show off. In the ancient world, it was seen as a divine engine of aversion, a tool with a single, absolutely crucial job.
And that job was to fight one of the biggest fears of the time, the evil eye, this belief that a single malevolent glare could bring you ruin. The logic they used was, well, it was beautifully simple and brutally effective. You fight terror with even greater terror. So they harnessed the Gorgon's lethal gaze to turn that evil eye right back on itself, reflecting any curse back to whoever sent it.
But where does that kind of terrifying power even come from? Well, to understand the symbol, you have to go back to the story behind the monster. And this isn't a tale about some creature that was born evil. It's a story about a priestess and her ruin. The myth tells us that Medusa was once a devout young woman, a priestess serving in the temple of Athena. But her life was shattered when the god Poseidon assaulted her inside that sacred temple. And Athena, in a rage, in what we would absolutely call victim-blaming today, punished Medusa. She transformed her into the snake-haired monster whose gaze would turn any man to stone. All the power in this symbol, it's born from that profound and deeply unjust trauma. And this horrifying origin, this is where the most important pivot in the whole story happens. Ancient people, artisans, and everyday folks, they took this story of absolute trauma and they systematically forged it into a shield. They turned a victim's curse into a guardian's talisman. Now, that power has a specific name, and it's the key to this whole thing. Apotropaic. It comes from the Greek apotropaios, which literally means to turn away. And it's so important to get this. This isn't aggressive magic. It's purely defensive. It's all about creating a boundary that evil just can't cross. The Gorgonian doesn't go looking for a fight. It just absolutely, undeniably repels it. You can really see that fundamental shift laid out here. On one side, you have the original story. It's all chaos, a victim's curse, divine punishment. But then look at what it becomes. A symbol of perfect order and symmetry, a guardian's stare, something that carries its own divine authority. The artists took this messy, painful story and they distilled it into a perfect, powerful, repeatable form. And they did it by zeroing in on the most terrifying features. These weren't just random artistic choices, not at all. The huge, unblinking eyes, the bared teeth, that scary protruding tongue, every single element was engineered to create a visual shock, to literally stop any evil force dead in its tracks. These little protective amulets, which were called phylacteria, they were basically spiritual weapons. And pretty soon, this protective power started to scale up. It moved from being a personal charm to something way, way bigger. The Gorgonian didn't just guard people anymore. It started to guard the very foundations of their world. It became the monster at the threshold. You can just see the circles of protection getting wider and wider. It starts small with an individual wearing an amulet. Then it moves to the soldier, right on the center of his shield. From there, it expands to the whole home, carved right into the doorways. And finally, it guards the most sacred spaces of all, the temples of the gods themselves. So here's the bottom line. Medusa's image became the ultimate gatekeeper. It stood guard at that critical boundary between the safe, sacred, ordered space of the home and the chaotic, dangerous, profane world outside. The very creature born from chaos became the ultimate enforcer of order. And That brings us to this profound and truly heartbreaking irony. The priestess who was violated inside a holy place was now the one everyone turned to protect those very same spaces. Her silent scream, carved in stone and cast in bronze, became a permanent, defensive roar to protect everyone else from suffering her same fate. But the story doesn't stop there, because the image of the Gorgon itself began to change over time, and this evolution tells us something really fascinating about the culture that used her image. So in the early days, the archaic period, the depictions are all about raw, unfiltered terror. The face is grotesque, almost bestial, and it's designed for maximum shock value. But as we get into the classical period, something amazing happens. She becomes more human. She even becomes beautiful. The artist started to see her not as a monster, but as a figure of immense tragedy. But, and this is so crucial, even as her face softens and becomes more graceful, the core elements of her power never, ever disappear. The writhing snakes for hair, they always remained. It was a non-negotiable part of the design, a visual guarantee that, hey, beautiful or not, the apotropic magic was still 100% potent. This whole artistic shift leaves us with a really compelling question. Were people starting to see a tragic beauty in her suffering and trying to reconcile the horror of her story with the elegance of their art? Or was it simpler than that? Were they just masking the raw, primal terror of the myth with a more polished and graceful design? It's something to think about. All of this, it all culminates in the incredible, enduring legacy of the Gorgonian. Because when you look at the whole picture, its widespread use becomes this final, eternal act of reclamation for a figure who had absolutely everything stolen from her. Just think about that powerful reversal for a second. The gods, in their cruelty and their carelessness, destroyed a maiden. But humanity, the people who carved her image, who wore her face, they collectively elevated her. They gave her a brand new purpose, transforming her into a universal protector. And her protection was put in the most vulnerable, the most vital places in human life. Her face watched over the graves of children. It strengthened the armor of soldiers marching into battle. It secured the doorways of families. And it sanctified the temples of the very same gods who had wronged her. And because of this incredible journey, many scholars have come to the conclusion that the Gorgonian is maybe the single most successful archetype to come out of all of Greek antiquity. I mean, no other symbol served so many people in so many ways for so long. And that success really is its ultimate power. This symbol took a story of absolute, total ruin, and through centuries of art and belief and human need, it transformed it into a legacy of absolute defiance. And so, we're left with this final, stunning paradox. The priestess who was cursed so that no one could even look at her without being turned to stone became the most viewed, most sought after, most widespread face in the entire ancient world. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does this ancient story teach us today about the strange and often defiant power that we can forge from pain?